solid Republican. We'll take you to the campaign trail shortly, but first, the investigations. They have the federal government's two main law enforcement agencies, the FBI and the Justice Department, essentially at each other's throats. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with some breaking details. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. The Wall Street Journal reports that a secret audio recording with an informant discussing the Clinton Foundation led to an internal battle between the FBI and the Justice Department. And tonight we're learning more about the frustration of FBI agents and why the case is not dead.
Revelations from WikiLeaks of special access for Clinton Foundation donors at Secretary Clinton's State Department, as well as new emails, are strengthening pay-to-play allegations. There are two tracks to the FBI investigation: the renewed classified email case and the Clinton Foundation, with agents out of Southern California, Arkansas, New York City, and Washington, D.C. working the investigation. Arguments over the strength of the evidence drove a wedge between the FBI agents and Justice Department that blocked access to investigative tools such as a grand jury. The issue came to a head last summer after the FBI director announced he would not recommend criminal charges for the mishandling of classified information.
At that time, I'm hearing from the agents that the morale went down pretty bad. A lot of people put a lot of hard work into that.
During his testimony after the announcement, Director Comey was non-committal about the foundation probe, which was ongoing.
Sure. Did you look at the Clinton Foundation?
I'm not going to comment on the existence or non-existence of any other investigations.
Multiple sources say the conflict escalated this summer when Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe met with Justice Department officials who were dismayed the foundation work continued. There are conflicting accounts over McCabe's actions, but former agents say they are deeply troubled by his wife's state Senate race in 2015. Dr. Jill McCabe was personally recruited by a longtime Clinton ally, Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, receiving $675,000 from the Democratic Party and McAuliffe's PAC. The FBI has denied a conflict because the campaign funds were received before McCabe had direct oversight for the email case. Former agents say it's another example of senior leadership getting a pass.
They feel that it was inappropriate. They feel that if it was them, they would be suspended right now, and that they actually said they would never have thought of themselves actually getting involved in those investigations because of the conflict of interest.
Two sources close to the FBI case emphasize that the president's email with Clinton over her private server cast a shadow over the investigation, along with Mr. Obama's repeated comments that there's no there.
The President of the United States is communicating with her under a pseudonym. They're not stupid. They can figure that out as well. This is a huge story. It's far bigger than the accusations against Donald Trump. This goes to the heart of fitness of character to serve as Commander-in-Chief.
Late today, State Department officials released 350 deleted emails from Hillary Clinton's private server that were recovered by the FBI and provided to the State Department because they are government records. These emails are near duplicates of what's already been provided, though, Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief Washington correspondent James Rosen has been working his sources as well on this story. He joins me now here in the studio. James, good evening. What are you hearing?
Good evening, Brett. Much of what we have heard, but a lot of it's confirming. For example, there are really two parallel cases the FBI has been investigating for over a year. One is the Clinton emails case. The other is the Clinton Foundation case, and agents are hard at work on both right now. The Foundation case, as opposed to the emails case, is seen by the field agents at the FBI, and my source is a well-placed source inside the FBI. It is the Foundation case that is seen as the stronger of the two, in part because of the way the emails case has been conducted. The field agents, for example, cannot believe that Director Comey authorized the provision of immunity to two of Hillary Clinton's lawyers, Heather Samuelson, who reviewed the emails, and Cheryl Mills, who was the Secretary's chief of staff, when normal procedure at the FBI would be to immunize one of them and then pressure that individual to flip and deliver the other. On the emails case, this source, I asked, is there anyone at the FBI who believes Secretary Clinton's private server wasn't hacked? And the answer was no. And the source said to me, it's pretty certain that she was hacked. It doesn't take a computer rocket scientist to figure that out.
And they're digging into that.
They're digging into it, and they believe as many as 5 to 7 individuals or hostile actors might have breached that server.
And the split we just heard about with Catherine, and I've talked about, real from
Yes.
your source?
Yes. The field agents are very disappointed that more hasn't been done on both cases, but particularly in the case of the foundation investigation. The field agents believe they have the goods for a case. It is the higher-ups, the political appointees, and the career prosecutors who tend to be more cautious and are behaving that way in this case.
James, thank you. We'll continue to follow it. There are new challenges to Hillary Clinton's sworn statement that she turned over all her work-related emails when ordered to. It is the latest leaked information from Clinton's tormentors at WikiLeaks. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry has that part of the story tonight.
Several new emails suggest some of Hillary Clinton's top aides and even her lawyer knew she did not turn over all of her work-related correspondence despite this promise.
I responded right away and provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related, which totaled roughly 55,000 printed pages, even though I knew that the State Department already had the vast majority of them.
6 days before that vow, Clinton aide Jennifer Palmieri wrote colleagues that Cheryl Mills was close to a deal with the State Department to release those work emails. Yet when ad maven Jim Margolis chimed in, if there is a release of the 55,000, are there others that are not being released? Definitely, replied Chief Strategist Joel Benenson. Also March 4th, advisor Mandy Grunwald pressed Palmieri on how they decided which emails were personal and then deleted. Family and friends? Are Huma, Philippe, Cheryl, etc. included in the 55,000 work-related? Asked Grunwald. A critical question because the same day, March 4th, Republican Trey Gowdy issued a subpoena for Clinton to preserve official email. Huma Abedin, Philippe Reines, and Mills were all on the State Department payroll and should have had a lot of official emails. Plus, both Mills and Abedin were paid by the Clinton Foundation while they were at the State Department, so their emails could be important to the FBI investigation of the foundation. At her March 10, 2015 news conference, Clinton did not specify if foundation emails fell under personal.
Emails about planning Chelsea's wedding or my mother's funeral arrangements, condolence notes to friends, as well as yoga routines.
A week later, after another damaging New York Times story about what was personal, Palmieri wrote on March 17th, strikes me as a big problem that the NYT is having selected emails leaked to them. Reines jumped in, there is nothing wrong with anyone having personal email addresses or her emailing someone's private account or vice versa. We're allowed to have personal lives. When someone suggested they set up a call to discuss, Palmieri, who has been quoted in other emails blasting the Catholic Church, said, "Praise Jesus, please do." Then, in August 2015, Clinton's personal lawyer, David Kendall, urged Clinton aides to edit a fact sheet claiming all work emails starting in March 2009 were turned over. Kendall writing, "We know there were other emails using the clintonemail.com address prior to that date. Could we make this more vague?" The problem is the very same day that her lawyer wrote that, August 8th, 2015, Hillary Clinton was dealing with a public records lawsuit, and she swore under the penalty of perjury that all of her work-related emails were provided to the State Department. Brett?
Ed, thank you. The nominees and their surrogates are sprinting toward the finish line in a constantly evolving picture of the electorate. The major focus today for the nominees themselves, North Carolina. We have Fox team coverage tonight. Jennifer Griffin's in Raleigh as Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders prepare for a joint appearance. We start off, though, with chief political correspondent Carl Cameron in Selma, North Carolina.
Jacksonville, Florida, his premier must-win state. Trump had his own take on Fox News reporting that federal investigators have, for a year, been looking into potential pay-to-play corruption between the Clinton Foundation and the State Department.
In other words, the FBI is investigating how Hillary Clinton put the office of Secretary of State up for sale in violation of federal law.
Trump accuses the Obama Justice Department of undermining FBI Director James Comey and obstructing investigators.
Very unfair to the FBI. They're out there doing their job, and they're being roadblocked.
Trump's launched another national attack ad.
Hillary Clinton is under FBI investigation again after her emails were found on pervert Anthony Weiner's laptop.
But if Trump wins the election, his international business empire could create countless potential conflicts of interest for his administration, according to the Wall Street Journal. Trump argues handing the businesses over to his kids eliminates any and all conflicts.
November 8th, you got to get and vote.
November 8th.
Trump held an afternoon rally in battleground North Carolina, also critical to his success. The latest Real Clear Politics average of polls in the state shows an exact tie in a state Romney won 4 years ago, but where Democratic early votes exceed those of Republicans. Trump's been increasingly disciplined for more than a week now, and even counseled himself not to blow the final sprint.
We've got to be nice and cool, nice and cool. Right, stay on point, Donald, stay on point. Because I've been watching Hillary the last few days. She's totally unhinged.
Carl Cameron in Selma, North Carolina. Carl, thanks. The Clinton campaign is targeting Hispanics and African Americans in the last days before Election Day. Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin is with the Clinton team in Raleigh, North Carolina tonight.
Donald Trump was endorsed by the official newspaper of the Ku Klux Klan. Do any of us have a place in Trump's America? It's not just about communities of color. That is not who America is.
A new Quinnipiac poll shows Clinton leading Trump in North Carolina by 3 points and up by 1 point in Florida. President Obama hit the campaign trail in Florida.
If you accept the support of Klan sympathizers before you're in office, you'll accept their support while in office.
Michelle Obama will join all 3 Clintons, Bill, Chelsea, and Hillary, at a rally in Philadelphia on Monday, the night before the polls close.
You don't see him hanging out with working people unless they're cleaning his room or mowing the fairways on his golf club. You're going to make this guy your champion if you're a working person?
Today's stop in the Tar Heel state followed a swing out west and visits to a hair salon.
You have my support.
And a barbershop in Nevada.
Jennifer Griffin with the Clinton team. Jennifer, thank you. In a campaign dominated by scandals and personal attacks, it is sometimes easy to forget there are actual issues to be considered when voting. You have told us that education is in your top 3. Our series, Issues That Matter, continues tonight with a look at where the nominees stand on how and what to teach your children. Here's senior correspondent Adam Housley.
You're gonna get hurt.
I'm their parent. My job is to protect them and nurture them. And so when you are talking about giving your kids away for 6 to 8 hours a day, that's a long time.
So you're following the arrows, right?
Gina and Thomas Harris are raising 3 school-aged kids, 17-year-old Eden, 12-year-old Eliza, and 5-year-old True. So education is a regular topic of conversation.
Okay, what about this one?
Early on, they chose to avoid the public schools Thomas grew up attending and instead opted for private schools and homeschooling, similar to how Gina was raised.
I feel like the public schools are, for the most part, not up to par, and it's a broken system. That's why we choose not to take part in it.
Like the Harrises, both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump think the U.S. school system should be better, especially one that spends more money per student than any other country in the world.
We have third world countries that are ahead of us. Third world countries. Countries that you wouldn't believe. Some countries that you've hardly heard of.
And there are striking differences into how each candidate plans to make it better.
Countries like Finland or Singapore standing really tall in these international rankings. When you really look behind the numbers, what you find is this. Teachers are treated with respect.
Clinton's K-12 plan largely focuses on teacher quality by, quote, elevating the profession and raising pay, which she also sees as a way to combat a shortage of quality teachers in lower performing areas.
Every child in this country deserves a good teacher in a good school, regardless of the zip code you live in.
Trump also wants to raise teacher pay, but not across the board.
So that we reward our best teachers instead of the failed tenure system that rewards bad teachers and punishes the good ones.
Trump's education plan revolves around school choice.
That means parents will be able to send their kids to the desired public, private, or even religious school of their choice. Competition.
Which is also his strategy to assist students living in poverty.
Their parents will choose the finest school. They will attend that school.
We need to understand there's no Republican or Democratic way to teach a kid how to read, write, or count.
Kevin Chavis with the American Federation for Children believes making quality education accessible to all will be a big challenge for the next president.
We have to inspire people to want to learn. For those kids in poverty, half of the school-age population in America, Many of them don't see the value in education.
He says either Clinton or Trump's job will be to figure out a way to inspire those students most in need. Clinton thinks universal preschool and doubling access to the Head Start program will help.
I want to end the so-called school-to-prison pipeline. Let's start with early childhood education.
And while Trump is yet to address preschool, he has said he would make daycare tax deductible for families like the Harrises, who are also looking into college for Eden. They say cost will be a deciding factor.
I feel like a lot of kids graduate nowadays when they can't even get a job and they have like a amount of debt.
Both candidates agree.
The students are choking on those loans. They can't pay them back. Before they start, they're in trouble.
Trump says the federal government shouldn't profit off student loans, and he's calling for tax breaks for schools who reduce costs. As for Clinton,
If your family makes less than $125,000 a year, you will not pay tuition at public colleges and universities. And if you make more than that, you can go to college debt-free. Pay what you can.
And now the last line.
So would either candidate's education stance impact how the Harrises will vote?
I think one of them better reflects what we would desire as parents for education for our kids.
I don't think that they will make enough of a difference, whoever's in office. Education kind of takes a back seat to a lot of things.
There is one education issue that comes up repeatedly at all of Donald Trump's events, a promise to end Common Core. How he will do that is unclear because the program is voluntarily adopted by and funded by the states. It's something Hillary Clinton at one time supported. She's for national education standards, but she considers the Common Core rollout a failure. Bret?
Adam, thank you. Tomorrow night, your number 2 issue, terrorism. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge will have our Issues That Matter report tomorrow. Up next, a call to arms by the leader of ISIS. We'll take you to the front lines in the battle to retake Mosul. Plus, part 2 of our series looking at the state of the U.S. military, how we fight. Two U.S. service members were killed and 4 others wounded today during fighting in northern Afghanistan. The Pentagon says a special operations unit came under fire during an assault against senior Taliban commanders. Those killed were said to be part of a train, advise, and assist mission with Afghan forces. 5 Americans have now been killed in combat in Afghanistan since early October. The shadowy leader of the ISIS terror group is urging his followers to keep up the fight for Mosul as Iraqi and Shiite forces continue their offensive there. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reports tonight from the war zone.
Fighting around Mosul intensified today. Iraqi federal police clashing with ISIS militants to the west. In the city itself, heavy street battles were being waged by Iraqi forces in the densely populated eastern side of the city. As for the first time in nearly a year, the terrorist leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was purportedly heard in an audio message. It was nothing short of a desperate call to arms to his followers.
Know that holding your ground with honor is 1,000 times easier than retreating in shame. As God says in the Holy Book, keep fighting, do not retreat.
Many refugees are retreating from the fighting amid mounting reports that ISIS is gathering even more civilians as human shields.
These poor people have just fled a village which had been ruled by ISIS for the last couple of years. They're here at a refugee camp just outside of Erbil. They don't think too much of the message coming today from the terror group's leader.
Baghdadi is not human. He is a monster.
Camps here and throughout the region are beginning to fill up with the displaced and the tales of terror.
They shaved my head. They beat me 95 times.
Still, despite how ugly the enemy and the fight is becoming, the U.S. military is still resisting for now any American boots on the ground inside Mosul city limits.
As far as U.S. forces or coalition forces going into Mosul, we're executing the Iraqi plan, and the Iraqi plan is that the only ones going in there right now are Iraqi forces.
An official with the Iraqi Special Forces told Fox News tonight that they have already been inside of Mosul, waging that tough urban warfare for 2 days now. Most here expect it to get tougher for many days to come. Bret.
Greg, thank you. Now we continue our special series on the American military. In tonight's How We Fight report, we look at the significant changes the armed forces have made with regard to who gets to fight. Changes designed to keep up with the times. Some welcome these developments, while others fear political correctness is getting in the way of what they see as the military's primary purpose, defeating enemies on the battlefield. It's an historic moment in San Francisco. Harvey Milk was a gay rights activist. And this ceremony is part of a new policy to name warships after civil rights leaders. There are critics out there who say that kind of a tipping the hat to political correctness.
Anytime you do anything, you're going to get criticism.
Navy Secretary Ray Mabus has named ships after civil rights leaders, such as Cesar Chavez and Medgar Evers.
I think it's important for America, and I think it's important as those ships go around the world, people understand who these folks were and what our values are.
I think it certainly is a break from tradition. I think we have a lot of war heroes. I think you could walk over to Arlington Cemetery and just randomly pick a name, and that would be an appropriate name for one of our warships. Secretary Mabus has the authority to do it. The naming of a ship is a symbolic act, but Mabus has brought about controversy with changes that go beyond symbolism.
Scream for your life!
Perhaps the biggest change in the Navy and the military in general is the greater integration of women and transgender people into our fighting forces.
When we opened every combat specialty to women, we became stronger. When we ended the ban on transgender service, we became stronger.
This new military has the support of many civil rights advocates.
So stay with me.
Donna Sachet is a prominent San Francisco drag queen by night, activist by day.
The military has come a long way with the LGBT community in a short time. If people are not living authentic lives, that are living a secret life the entire time they're serving the military, how can they be really a full part of the team?
Aaron Belkin is a noted LGBTQ scholar who helped the Pentagon devise its new policy.
Having a ban in place that prevents people to be honest about who they are gets in the way of military readiness.
Retired General John Kelly of the Marine Corps believes it may not be that simple.
Right now, if you are being medicated, unless it's fairly temporary, you will get discharged. It's my understanding that some transgenders need lifelong hormonal treatments. Then the depression issue in many cases.
Gender dysphoria is the distress that a transgender person might feel if they're born in the wrong body. Not all transgender people suffer from distress.
It goes back to this issue, Brett. Does it make us more lethal? And I clearly would argue that it doesn't make us more lethal. I guess the argument is if they make the standards and they want to serve the country, why wouldn't transgenders? There's a lot of ways to serve your country. The military is a very, very different organization in the sense of what it does. At the end of the day, it fights.
A more diverse force is a stronger force.
I live in Silicon Valley. The most dynamic companies are inclusive and diverse. But lightning strikes of great ideas are not the metric of success of a military unit. Unit cohesion and battlefield lethality are the measures of success of military units. So the rules that apply in other circumstances don't necessarily apply in the military.
The number of transgenders in the military, however, is dwarfed by the number of women. Thus, the efforts to integrate women into active combat specialties is likely to have an even greater effect.
The Marines are the only ones that have a separate boot camp, and they are moving toward more and more integration at boot camp today.
When this integration was first proposed, the Marine Corps decided, and I think did exactly the right thing, to do a study.
The Marines released that study last year. It found that combat units integrated with female Marines typically did not move as quickly or shoot as accurately. Women also were more than twice as likely to suffer injuries as a result of carrying heavy combat loads. But Navy Secretary Mabus rejected its findings.
The problem with that study was that it measured units and it measured averages, not individuals. Marines have never been about average. You look at individuals. Can that individual make it? Then, if you're a man or a woman, if you're black or white or brown, doesn't matter.
Did the Marines give the Navy Secretary faulty data?
The Marine Corps hired the best kind of sports medicine and physiological department in any university in the country. The study came up with women, generally speaking, are not as strong as men. We paid $36 million for that. Of course, it was rejected.
You always have some folks that think any change is going to be bad. I mean, you look back when we integrated in the 40s.
Present arms, ready?
You had people saying this is going to be terrible, this is going to ruin the Marines or whatever, and it never happened.
I think the desegregation example is a facile and inaccurate one, because nobody doubted that black soldiers could fight as well as white soldiers did. Moreover, you didn't have the thorny problem of sexual attraction. And then there's your average woman would have a difficult time meeting the demands of an average man in combat, which is unquestionably reducing battlefield lethality.
You know what they say? They say, General, you're part of the old school, just resistant to change.
The people that are driving this have no clue what combat's about. So they have no idea.
But it's doing harm in your eyes.
These are phenomenally good young men and women. And we turn them in the United States Marines. We love them. But at the end of the day, we're the ones that put them in body bags. We're the ones that bury them. And we don't have any other agenda than to fight our nation's battles and to win with the absolute minimum casualties. We know more about this than they do.
One of the things that I've got to be certain to do is be non-political in this job. I represent the United States Navy and Marine Corps. I'm going to be non-political. I'm going to do the job that the country requires.
On tomorrow's How We Fight, we look at changes at the front, specifically the rules of engagement. Do they work in the current war on terror? A constitutional crisis is brewing in Great Britain over its decision to leave the European Union. The nation's High Court has ruled the Prime Minister cannot begin the process for the so-called Brexit without parliamentary approval. The ruling comes in a lawsuit challenging Prime Minister Theresa May's plans to launch 2 years of exit negotiations by the end of March. The government has appealed to the country's Supreme Court with a hearing set for next month. Britons voted earlier this year by a 52-48 margin to leave the EU. Stocks were off again today. The Dow lost 29. The S&P 500 was down 9. The Nasdaq dropped 47. Just 5 more long days until Election Day, and we continue to get new information on the Clinton investigations. More revelations from WikiLeaks. We'll talk about all of that with the panel after a quick break.
Government official has been caught selling her public office, threatening national security, and engaging in a massive criminal cover-up. She is likely to be under investigation for many, many years. Also likely to conclude in a criminal trial. This is not what we need in this country, folks.
Do we want this man appointing judges? Do we want him controlling the Justice Department? Well, people who are voting for him, that's what they would get.
Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump on the trail today as we get the information about the investigations moving forward with the Clinton Foundation and the email investigation. We are still getting WikiLeaks every day by the thousands. Here is one from Jennifer Palmieri, March 4th. Cheryl is working with state to get an agreement on the release of 55,000 pages of emails. She have to state the hope would be that we are able to say tonight to the press that we are working with state to get emails released soon. Not sure where those discussions will land, but hope it's either state agrees to release on timely basis or we pledge to release them ourselves in 10 days to a week. Jim Margolis responds, if there is a release of 55,000, are there others that are not being released? Joel Bennison, an advisor, responds, definitely. Palmieri then responds separately, 55,000 is entire batch of emails she gave to state, so that represents all of the email that was official business. Only emails we would not be making public are her truly personal ones. Mandy Grunwald writes, do we have a definition of truly personal? Family, friends? Are Huma, Philippe, Cheryl, etc. included in the 55,000? Here's what I asked her in March of last year.
What we turned over were more than 30,000 emails that I assumed were already in the government system, Bret, because they were sent to state.gov addresses.
Sure, but there were some that were just recently discovered and turned over.
No, that was in the State Department, not in me.
Okay.
I've turned over everything.
Okay, let's bring in our panel. Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Susan Page, Washington bureau chief at USA Today, and Charles Hurt, political columnist for the Washington Times. Okay, Judge, first about all that we've learned and kind of put it in context here.
Well, we have learned that the FBI made a mistake when it terminated the investigation on July 5 on the basis of what it then knew. The stated reason by FBI Director Comey was no prosecutor would take the case. We have learned that no grand jury was hearing evidence or observing testimony, and we have learned that FBI agents felt that they couldn't conduct an investigation as broadly as they want. We know that because the investigation was reopened last week because of more material that came into their hands. Some by a variety of sources. Some from other cases, like the Anthony Weiner case. Some from cases that the Wall Street Journal talked about, like surveillance tapes of people who were doing business with the Clinton Foundation, which also tipped off the email. We also know that Mrs. Clinton was not true to you, was not being honest to you, and not being honest to the public when she said that everything has been returned. And we know that her own advisors speculated that she was not being honest about saying everything that was returned. And finally, we know with near certainty, not absolute certainty, but near certainty, that foreign intelligence agents hacked her emails. Those agents of foreign governments that wish us well, like Israel, and those agents of foreign governments that wish us ill, like Russia, China, and Iran.
Yeah, I think they're in the process of digging in and with a cyber team to try to find those fingerprints, but they're very tough to do. The other thing we're learning, Susan, is the split within not only the FBI and DOJ, but within the FBI itself about these two-track investigations, the email and the foundation.
We do. We hear reports like your report, talking to FBI sources affiliated with the FBI or knowledgeable about the FBI.
And inside, James Rosenthal.
Yeah, saying that they want to pursue investigations. They feel there's ground to pursue it. They're eager to do it. But we also hear from other sources reported by ABC and NBC that there are people in the FBI who do not feel like these are leads that are particularly substantial and we're pursuing in an aggressive way. What's extraordinary is that this debate is going on in public, that we have anonymous sources on both sides talking to reporters. The debate,
how does it play? How does it sink in?
Well, I think it reinforces, for so many voters, it reinforces the concerns they have about Hillary Clinton. Certainly not helpful for her, whatever the facts are within the FBI. And I think it must be alarming to some within the FBI to have this be so public, because of course these kind of debates go on, I think, routinely when there are investigations underway, but they're usually going on in private.
No, that's true. And the split that we're talking about, some of it has to do with an anger inside there about these investigations and where they have gone or not gone.
Yeah, and the pressure that obviously Director Comey was under between the time that he made the announcement in July and when he announced that he was going to reopen. But you know, stepping back, I mean, it's really hard to overstate how extraordinary this situation is. You have someone running for president who's, by a lot of polls, looks like she's going to win, or is at least ahead in the polls right now by a small margin, who is going to go in under criminal investigation by the federal government that she's then going to take control over. You already have conversations about impeachment proceedings. You have real questions about if she is elected, does President Obama then pardon her before she becomes president, or does she pardon herself? I mean, it's truly an extraordinary situation.
But some of that has, you know, obviously Republicans jumping on that in an effort to stoke the political flame. Here is Vice Presidential nominee Tim Kaine on all of this today.
People are throwing the impeachment word around before the election has even taken place. I mean, first, it kind of suggests a little bit of defeatism, like, well, we think we're probably going to lose. Second, it also suggests a really bad view of what the role of a legislator is. Same about this investigation stuff. You know, I thought legislators were supposed to legislate. I mean, investigations are part of it, but the real issue is legislation.
Judge?
Well, in fairness to Senator Kaine, there are Republicans who have said we have enough investigations, assuming Mrs. Clinton wins, to last a couple of years. On the other hand, the talk of impeachment, in my view, is grossly premature and highly irregular. The Congress is not going to invalidate the popular will should Mrs. Clinton get elected because of something she allegedly did before she was in office. Charlie's right. President Obama could pardon her. Charlie's right again. She could pardon herself. There would be great political fallout to either of those pardons, but that would certainly insulate her from any political consequences. There was a Supreme Court opinion that did not exist when her husband was being pursued. And that opinion, which involves him on the civil side, Clinton versus Jones, says pretty clearly the president is immunized from the consequences of criminal prosecution while president. So that would prevent her from having to defend herself while she's in the White House should the FBI and a Justice Department that she would control decide to move against her.
Yeah. On the flip side, Democrats, Susan, pointing to this Wall Street Journal piece about potential problems for Donald Trump and his foreign business entanglements. Those whom Ivanka Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and Eric Trump have worked with abroad include the family of a developer of India, who is the ruling party politician, Azerbaijani government minister's son, and a media company that became the Turkish president's outlet of choice during the July 15th coup attempt. No recent president has had a portfolio of international business interests as extensive as Mr. Trump's, or as great a level of business engagement on his behalf by offspring who have also played a role in his campaign. He says he hands the whole thing over to the kids, and that takes him out of it.
So whoever gets elected, it's going to be a complicated couple years, right? And of course, there wasn't in that Wall Street Journal story, there weren't allegations of impropriety or criminal behavior. It's mostly that how complicated entanglements. It would be how complicated is this going to be? Traditionally, a president would turn it over to his holdings over to a blind trust. That is not what Donald Trump says he would do. He would turn it over to his kids, which does not provide the degree of insulation that we are accustomed to with presidents and their holdings.
Bottom line, we are talking about investigations, we're talking about charges, we're talking about a campaign that has devolved into attacks a lot of times, and there's not a lot of optimism about getting things done.
Oh man, I mean, on both sides, it's all about what's wrong with the other candidate right now, and of course, and as Susan points out, it's going to be complicated no matter what happens, and I think that's one of the things that's kind of helping the Clinton campaign is that this stuff is so complex that it's hard for us to understand it, and we're doing this for a living. For people out there who have real jobs, they really don't sort of understand all the specifics.
We will break down what map we understand, the electoral map, and the polls today. Set the table for Tuesday with the panel after a break.
He's down here campaigning for crooked Hillary. Why isn't he back in the White House bringing our jobs back?
He's got support here in Florida. He's got some support around the country. No, he does. If he didn't, then I wouldn't have to go around getting everybody to vote.
I'm ready to grab that baton. He's going to have to bend down for me to be able to reach it, because, you know, he's a tall man. But I've been practicing.
Hillary Clinton, President Obama, and Donald Trump on the trail today. Here's where they were. Donald Trump was in Jacksonville, Florida, Concord, North Carolina, Selma, North Carolina. Mike Pence had a stop in Iowa, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Melania Trump with a speech today in Pennsylvania. You'll hear a little bit of that in a minute. Hillary Clinton's campaign in North Carolina, 2 stops. Arizona for Tim Kaine. Miami, Florida, and Jacksonville, Florida for the president. Las Vegas, Nevada for Bill Clinton. Wisconsin for Chelsea Clinton, and Bernie Sanders was in Ohio and North Carolina with Hillary Clinton. Take a look at our electoral scorecard now, and it has shifted a bit. New Hampshire from lean Democrat to toss-up. Ohio, toss-up to lean Republican. Indiana and Missouri go from lean Republican to solid Republican. As you take a look at the average of polls in New Hampshire, now you have Hillary Clinton up 0.8. That has shifted pretty much, well, a lot in recent days. This is the average of recent polls. And in North Carolina, it is tied, 46.4 to 46.4 in the average of polls. Just a sampling there. There are many others. We'll bring back our panel. Susan, right now, it is tighter but it still seems that Hillary Clinton has the better path to those states that she needs. It is significantly tighter. If we were talking a week ago before the Comey announcement, before the Comey letter, it looked like we were talking about the Senate's gone, could the House even be in play? That's not where we are now. We have Hillary Clinton with an easier path, a more solid blue path, but she, as you say, structurally, she's still got the advantage. It would still be running the table for Donald Trump to get to 270 electoral votes, which is not to say it would be impossible. Think how much change we've seen in the past week, but still difficult. Judge.
I agree very much with what Susan said, particularly in light of Hillary's ground game, which is extraordinary, and Donald Trump's ground game, that is the human beings on the ground who get you to the polls when they have a fairly confident idea that you're going to vote for Hillary. Donald Trump's ground game is minuscule compared to hers, and there are even some states where it has very little communication and contact and cooperation with the local Republican organizations. So right now, obviously tighter than a week ago. Let me say that if the Comey letter had come earlier in the month, and this is worth talking about, I think, because we have reason to believe that he and senior FBI officials knew about this long before last Friday. If that letter had come earlier in the month, I think Mrs. Clinton would be down and Donald Trump would have a clear path, but I don't think there was enough time for the negative effect from that to process itself in large numbers of voters.
Interesting. Momentum versus ground game.
From the beginning, Donald Trump has run this campaign. It's a very national, big picture sort of campaign, and he did it through the primaries. And it's served him pretty well, remarkably well, considering the fact that he's never had much of a ground game or seems to care much about how people have done this before him. But normally I would say that, if you didn't have, obviously the ground game cost Mitt Romney the election in 2012, arguably. But that said, this juggernaut that Trump has obviously tapped into something, and maybe that is enough this year to overcome that.
What about the messaging, Susan, on the trail, and what Hillary Clinton's closing with, and obviously what Donald Trump's closing with?
Hillary Clinton is not closing with what she intended to close with, because she intended to close with a positive message to say, here's a reason to come out and vote for me.
Stand together, strong together.
Instead she's closing with the argument that she's had so far, which is Donald Trump is unfit for the presidency. And that, by the way, is also his closing argument, as we saw in a tough ad he has today that talks about Anthony Weiner.
So it's the unfit close.
Right. It's unsatisfying. It's unsatisfying for people who have made up their minds and strongly want either of these two. It's unsatisfying for people who are going to vote for a third-party candidate. It's unsatisfying for people who have not yet made up their minds that the closing argument is not, here's how I can bring people together, but here's how bad the other side is.
That is